Alright, and welcome to this video. I'm going to apologize ahead of time because in order to get some of the detail shots for this video, I'm going free camera. So I might wiggle around a little bit. It happens. I'm going to try to stabilize as best as I can, and sometimes it might get blurry, so I might have to get it to refocus just to get some of these detail shots. But today we're going to be evaluating a painting. And in fact, we're going to evaluate 3 paintings to see whether they're actually worth anything. Because that's sometimes one of the hardest things to do. A client came to me, and these paintings had been on his parents' wall for a long time. And he wanted to see that now that they're no longer around, see if they were actually worth anything. And so, it's an interesting thing to look into, because sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But it all depends upon certain conditions. Now, I'm going to talk about why these paintings normally aren't worth that much. And I'm also going to talk about why you usually see this sort of work a lot. But we're also going to go into some of the details as to why they're not that worth it that much either. So, let's get into it first. The frames themselves were pretty badly damaged. Not so much damage as much as just mistreated. There's some tobacco stains on here, and you can even see some of the discoloration around some of the edges where some of the stuff sat on the bottom of the frame. It happens. Older paintings, you sometimes get that. Definitely smells like potpourri, so that would have to be removed if these were actually worth anything. In order for me to evaluate them to see what the true condition of them were, I had to pull them out of the frame. And let me just say this. It's not really... They side stapled it, so that sort of like damages the whole canvas and the whole 9 yards. Not so much that you can't repair it, but like when you have it going through the edge here, sometimes that can really mar it. Just try getting it out of there, especially if you have a damaged frame and you need to replace this thing or what have you. From an archival standpoint, it's kind of a rough way of doing it. It's like putting a screw through a painting. It's hard. Now let's first talk about the good stuff. Now, there are 2 sets of paintings. One by a P. Wong and one by a K. Wok. Now, depending on where you land on this sort of thing, I can't find too much on Peter Wong, whether it's Peter C. Wong or Peter Wong, that actually shows that he's actually the one who painted these. And in fact, I found this actual painting on eBay. And in fact, I found like 17 of this painting on eBay. So there's some discrepancies there, including in with the signature. I've seen this signature on just this painting, because it was done numerous times, at least 5 different ways. So when you start to compare work of the same artist, and the signature changes drastically, it's sort of one of the first indicators that this is probably mass-produced. Now, that's not to say that Peter Wong is not the official artist of the original paintings, because he probably painted the original painting and had it sent off for original reproductions. And if you're unfamiliar with the term original reproductions, a lot of times an artist will have one painting, and you'll see this a lot with like people who do a lot of palette knife work. They'll have one original painting, and somebody wants to have that painting as well. And so they'll just make it again. I mean, they know all the steps. You can just remake it again. So it's an original reproduction of a painting. Does it hold the same value as that first original painting? Probably not. But it does still hold some value. Now, on a technical standpoint, there's nothing wrong with this. I mean, I've seen some of these ones that are worse. This one's actually pretty good. But the detail work is pretty spot on. Come on, focus in. So the detail work is pretty spot on. It's all palette knife work. This one's actually pretty well done compared to some of the other ones I've seen. The line work is a lot cleaner, stuff like that. So whoever made this one was pretty well skilled. And I'll show you the difference between this and the K-Walk one, and why they do different things. But yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad at all. The detail work is there. The technical skill is there. So if this is a original reproduction, because it's not an original, it's not bad. Now, you can tell the difference in who makes this stuff, because you do see a little bit of a different artist hand in all this stuff, including with the way that these marks are made versus those marks. So I'm thinking this is going to be made in a factory. But then again, you encounter something like this one, which I wasn't able to find really anything on this artist. But it's the same palette range, the same tooling work, the same everything. So I'm thinking these came out of the same factory, because they had the same frame, they had the same everything. So I think what they did was they basically just changed up the signature, that sort of thing. Kind of like a underhanded way of doing it, but it is what it is. Now these frame, there are certain ways to identify that these are mass produced. Now let's look at the backs of these guys. The first thing is that I have batch numbers. So there's a registration number, and this one's actually pretty high on this number range. So I don't know if the registration numbers are different or not, but this is, when I took it out of the frame, this was on the back of all these paintings. The difference between this one and this one is what? Almost 50,000 numbers higher. So who knows how many were actually in these production ones, if they did partials, or if they skipped per batch. But they never filled any of this out. So I'm thinking that these were mass produced and then put on a wholesale. Also, the canvases, they were pre-cut flat, and then they were painted and then stretched around a canvas. So it's one of those ones where they make these things, and it's usually when we see like one of those pictures of a Chinese factory where they have like 50 to 100 artists in one room painting the same thing over and over and over again. Usually you see this. It's usually they have somebody like assistants to run by and have all the boards all pre-stretched, so that way it's all flat work. And if I look closely, I'll probably find a push pin hole where they tacked all this stuff down so they could do it all flat. So I see these things around here telling me that this was flat made. So you see that they can do the palette knife work and not damage the canvas underneath by accident by slicing into it, especially when they're scraping down. So I see these things, I can identify them. So that's usually the way that's done. I doubt that the original artist would have done that. And in fact, this is probably a much larger painting, because I've seen this painting go for, instead of being this smaller 8 by 10 size, I saw one that was 18 by 24 and much more detailed. So yeah, this is probably mass produced. Now, some of the things also to notice is that when they stretch this stuff, because they usually speed dry these things, it cracks along the edges. A lot of artists that do this flat work, like I've done a lot of flat work before, they will go through and they will fix that edge when they actually stretch it. It's just adding a little bit of a filler, like gel medium or like a clear little bit of a linseed oil if it's oils, just as something to let it fill in that stuff, and then edge paint it a little bit. It works. But I don't see that happening. Now, the other side is that they've taped this down here. So this one's taped. This one is... It was taped on the first round, but not on the second. You can tell by the way that that's all layered out. And then this one was probably done as a less experienced part of the shop. So they definitely went over the lines, had it pre-taped the whole way. And I see that all the way across here. Let's see if I can get it to zoom in. Come on, you can do it. There you go. But you can see that edge tape right there. And they did it. They left that tape on the whole way. The gesso itself, it's pretty inexpensive. It's very glossy, so it probably didn't have a whole lot of binders to it, like you would normally see. Not a lot of gypsum into it, so it's probably just a lot of binder, not so much a gypsum-based gesso. So it's just a canvas primer, in essence. Now let's talk about some of the longevity on this thing. There is some damage to the actual paintings, like this one right here. Now if I can zoom in, and it actually wants to do it, there it is. There is some damage, and it runs from the sails all the way up. Now, I can tell that this is an edge strike. Something hit it, and it flexed it along that point. It doesn't look like it's too damaged, and it won't cause too many problems. This can easily be fixed with like some gesso and then just some patchwork painting. If I was going full restorative, I'd probably try to match up the actual paints with the oil paints. But being as this is a very inexpensive oil paint, as we can tell right over here, being around 30 years old, there's not a lot of linseed oil in these paints as oil paints. So these are less expensive oil paints. So these are definitely reproduction oil paints. But there is some damage on there, especially right up in here. Let me see that one right there. That one actually floats beneath the paint and lifts that up. There is some paint cracking there around the tip of the sail. But all this is not too bad. There's some cracking here. So this one has suffered some stress. And I haven't seen that in the other ones. Really not much to this one at all. That if I cleaned up all the nicotine staining that I see like right up in here and stuff, then it would probably be fine. Just a little bit of patchwork and it's good. Now let's talk about valuation on these things. Unfortunately, it goes by what you can get for it. And so when I look at these things and the state of which they were in, the state of the frames that they were in, because they were frame dependent in many of the sales that I saw, there was much higher quality frames being sold on a lot of the paintings that I saw being sold, with less damage to the frames, less damage to the artwork. But they were still only getting between $1 and $15 for one of these paintings. There were a few that sold for around $45 or $50, but they were also 3 times this size. So there's no real value in these paintings. There's value in them. And if I probably cleaned these guys up, made sure the frames were reproduced, the frames were fixed, I fixed some of the canvas issues that pop up from having to, do some of the things to it, and fix some of the edge paint right here like that, stuff like that, I might be able to get around $25 or $30 for them. I'm not too sure how valid this is as a Peter Wong painting, but apparently the most expensive one sold at auction for $264, and it was a large painting. It was somewhere like around I think it was around 18 by 24 or something like that. So there's not really any value for this. For the clients, they didn't even want to bother with it, because by the time I estimate out my time to just repair this one, it probably wouldn't make them any money. It probably wasn't even worth it. This also had no sentimental value for them, because usually if it was something like they went to China and they came back with these as sort of like a memento, might be a thing, or if they met the artist, or if they, there was something along the lines to say that this was a sentimental value for them. It might have made it worth it for them, for at least for me to restore it, but it didn't. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with these paintings. There's nothing wrong with the type of artwork. There's nothing wrong with the technique of artwork. There's nothing wrong with the colors of it. I can't find anything wrong with these guys. They're great. But sad part is, it's probably been mass produced, and that's the bad part about it. Like, it's a fantastic painting, but you've probably seen these paintings just like this at one of those shows that say all original artwork framed for $50. And you go out there and you see a painting on a wall, and you sort of say, I would love that painting. And the dude goes into the back of his booth, comes out with that exact same painting as an oil painting, and hands it to you, and you get a whole painting with the frame and everything like that for $50, no problem. Post resale. And that's where these things probably come from. And so you'll probably see the ones that are the beginner painters, like the ones that are learning how to paint all this stuff, because there's some technical sloppiness that you don't see in this one, but you see in this one. In particular, right up here in the using the tip to scrape into some of the coloring here. Let's see if I can get it to focus in. Here we go. So as you can see, there is some sloppiness right up in here, and that's not a bad thing. Like I said, I don't see anything wrong technically with it, but you can definitely tell the difference between this sort of line work, where things are sort of like a little bit more on the gloopy side, unintentionally, versus like over here, where things are a little bit more crisp and you have a little bit more control, but then you still have the impasto built up effects of a palette knife. So there's certain things that are different in these two different ways. So I'm thinking this is the artist proof area, like the ones that are learning all the technique. That's why I see the edge taping and a bunch of the other stuff. And then you got the like, here we go. Here's a good one right here. And then this one, look at that right there. See that line work right there? It's exactly the same line work right there. So this is the same exact technique. It's hard to not have the same technique shown in one of these paintings. But there it is, same painting technique, left to right. So this is probably done by the same group of people. Even though that's K Wok, this one is P Wong. This one has, look at that line work right there on that scaffolding on the back of that ship. Then you look right over here, and this one has a little bit more control with that looseness, and it's still there. And even though there's still some sloppiness right up in there, but that just comes from the knife itself. No, these are fine technically, but you can definitely tell that these are 3 different hands making all of this. Same technique, 3 different hands. Only way to say it. So, not really worth that much, but there we go. Now let's talk about one other thing, is the frames. Now this was the frame. Now this is definitely mass produced. This was a tortoise-shelled frame that was not tortoise-shelled after it was put together. So this was all just pre-made and then all stapled together. And it still has the same canvas strip that I've seen anything from like the 80s, the 70s to the 80s. They put this canvas strip on there, and I hate it. It picks up all the grime and the dirt. And this is supposed to be a bright canvas color, and it's already like a gray, and it shows off the dirt. This also has a lot of always some issues where something's lifting up right there, because this adhesive is not made to last that long. I mean, you can see that adhesive is just brittle, and I probably yank this, like lift this up and just watch it float away. So this has a little bit of edge damage. It has some stuff on there, so this frame isn't really worth that much. There's some water scale, like from moisture in the air, where it causes the wood to swell a little bit, and it causes the lacquer to pucker and do its thing. It's still bonded with the wood, but it's rough. So I have to go through and strip that out, get rid of the nicotine, get rid of the nicotine on the paintings. So these will be repaints. And since the clients left these here with me because they weren't anything for them, I'm going to do something fun with them, because they're not really worth much on a resale side unless I modify them. And so, like, I already have to clean them up. I already have to touch up the paints. I still got to do some of my restorative work, and I'll use somewhat close. I'll use gel mediums and acrylics to clean them up. That way they have a little bit more flex on there. Specifically on these guys right here, where I got some stress cracks along the surface. I want to be able to get it squish it in underneath there and let it be able to, as the painting works, doing stuff. Because there's no damage to the back here. There's not one bit of damage back here, which is fantastic for a canvas this old. Is not seeing any damage. But what I'm gonna do is I'm probably gonna repaint them, add some stuff to it. Maybe like a scenery of like a Leviathan type of thing coming up and trying to take down one of these ships, or maybe add Cthulhu in the background or something like that. Something fun. And if the original client wants to have one of these paintings back again, they can have it, because I'll just make some prints of it and it'll be funny, like that sort of thing. But fantastic work. I wish they were worth more, but that's the way it goes when you buy artwork, and that's what you can look for, and then some of the things you can identify. So if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Otherwise, see you next video.